Good evening, everybody. It's so lovely to be with you all. Yes. So I do want to let you know that I'm working on a retreat, just trying to get my schedule straightened out. It's probably going to be the weekend before Christmas, I believe. And so we'll see. We'll see what shakes out, but that's what it's looking like right now. That I can pull off with my schedule. Okay. So I thought I'd share something just quite inspiring, which I read about today. And when I was young, I used to read the lives of the saints. And in the mail today, I just received this. It's a little Catholic magazine, and I was flipping through it, just it's junk mail, and it wasn't even mail that belonged to me, but to the previous tenant. I was getting ready to throw this magazine out when I saw this story about Saint Maximilian, Saint Maximilian Kolbe, and he was from Poland. He died in 1941. And when he was quite young and before he had become a priest, he had this love affair with Mary. He invited Mary into his life, and he just had this wonderful relationship with him. And she offered him a crown of purity and a crown of martyrdom. And he said yes to both of them. After a short period of time, he became sick with tuberculosis. And of course, that was a horrific illness to get and quite untreatable in those days. But as the story went, he was in Poland in Nazi-occupied Europe, and he started printing pamphlets, about loving everyone, and pamphlets that were critical of the Nazis. And so at some point they rounded him up and they threw him in Auschwitz, and he had this superhuman strength. They said he was this little man and he was sick as could be. And yet he had this strength about him, this power and this light. And he had these, it's just an artist's drawing of him, but he had these incredible eyes. And out of his eyes shined so much light that the prison guards there, the SS, they couldn't stand to look at his eyes. And so they kept shouting at him, to look down, look at the ground. They didn't want to see his eyes. And at one point, there was a prisoner who had escaped Auschwitz. And in those days, when someone escaped, they would round up 10 other prisoners and put them in this thing called the starvation bunker. And one of the men, he really pleaded with the Nazis to not, force him to go in the starvation bunker. He said that he had a wife and children that he needed to be alive for. And so Father Maximilian Kolbe, he said, well, let me go in his place. And so the SS officer said, okay, and chose 9 others and sent them to their death. And, after a number of days, almost everyone was dead, but Maximilian he just kept living on again, even though he had TB and he was being starved to death. And finally, some guards came in and poisoned the rest of them. And so he died in 1941. And it's just this amazing, amazing story of a great saint who wanted to have a love that would have no limits at all. And so here he was in the concentration camp, still giving and serving and being a martyr. It's just so amazing what is capable when we are connected to God, when we are connected to our spirit, when we choose to live beyond the body. Now, I can say that I've made this mistake that when I studied the lives of the saints, that often I would compare my human self to the saints' divine selves. And when I did this, I realized, gosh, I just fail miserably in every way. I fail miserably when I compare my human self to their divine self. And what's important here is, not to get stuck in that trap of comparison, but rather to acknowledge at the heart of every great saint is their divinity. At the heart of our greatness is our divinity. This is where we connect with Christ, with the Buddha, with all the great saints, the avatars, the great yogis and Buddhas, bodhisattvas, dakinis who've walked this earth, is when we step beyond our human self, when we stop identifying with the limitations of our human self and start to connect to our unlimited nature. For it is in our unlimited nature that we discover our freedom. And so I invite you in this moment to close your eyes and to feel into your body, connecting to that which is unlimited, connecting to that which is pure and beautiful, that which is timeless and eternal, that which is beyond name and form and gender, age and current career, and that which is beyond that was born in some family, some moment in history. For when we identify with our human self, we suffer under the causes and conditions and limitations of our human self. I invite you in this moment to find that which is silent and free, that which has a love that knows no limits. A love that has no limits. And so if you look in your human mind and your human heart, you probably won't find a love that has no limits. You'll find a love that has limits, a love that says, I want to be in a relationship with this type of person. I want to have this amount of money in my bank. I need to feel safe and supported and healthy before I can love first. And I'm inviting you to acknowledge and validate that that's the human condition. But to give yourself permission to trust that if you take a leap, you'll find something much greater. If you take a leap beyond your human self, that you begin to find something much greater. And it can be helpful if you don't know this place. If you have a basic trust, a basic faith that there is something here beyond the human self, something that inhabits and enlivens the human self, that animates your body, that animates your mind, that animates your emotional nature. And we can always ask, what is it? What is it that's here that is alive, primordially alive? What is it that's here that is vibrant and radiant? And has no name, no face, no age, no gender. What is this presence that is beyond? Can I be curious enough to get to know this thing? This presence, this essence that is beyond sickness, old age, and death. What is here that is fundamentally good? Fundamentally pure and divine. What is that? Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you experience it right now? Is the very fabric of your own being. And so I invite you just to stay with this presence, experiencing it. And I encourage you to fall in love with this divinity that you are. To fall in love with this divinity that you are. When I was young, I used to fall in love with the saints. I used to fall in love with these great beings of light. I used to worship them and want to mimic their lives. And I saw this picture, I actually cut it out in this magazine of Jesus today. And I would fall in love with the image of the Christ. And of course, that can be helpful in the beginning. But it wasn't till much later on in the path that I realized that what every great saint, what every great master, Dakini did, is they fell in love with their own self, with their own divinity. If you want this transformation to take place, to take root in an actual lived, embodied way in your own life, one must fall in love with that which is good, true, and beautiful. about your very own essence. Most of us, we make this mistake. I made this mistake for many years. I hated my human self. I could hate myself into freedom. It did not work. It did not work. It's through loving myself, seeing that there is something fundamentally good here. This is why Jesus could say, the Father and I are one. The Father and I are one. You find the Father within you. You find the Mother within you. You find the Christ within you. And we worship this. We worship this. And as you worship this, you'll notice that your behavior, that your human behavior, begins to change without very much effort. Like if all day you're falling in love with the peace that you are, the compassion that you are, the light that you are, the space that you are. It's very hard to be judgmental. It's very hard to be inwardly divided. It's very hard to be lost in thought when you fall in love with the space that you are, the brilliance that you are. It's very hard to be an egomaniac. If you fall in love with peace, with light, with innocence, very hard to be a narcissist if you fall in love with your innocence. And so there's seemingly two worlds here. The world of our human egoic nature and the world of our divinity. I think it was Jesus who said, I could be wrong, but in the Bible, you cannot serve two masters. And so at some point on the path, we choose. Who is it we are going to serve? The God of fear or the God of trust, truth, light, and love? The God of ego, our own personal wants and desires, which aren't even ours, they just belong to the culture. We're going to serve the God of a fearful, insecure individuality, or the God of oneness. Which God are you going to serve? Which God are you going to bow before? When you bow before that which is higher, you become the higher. When you bow before that which is lower, you become the lower. That's really what the law of attraction is. It's like, which God are you bowing before? The truth or how you feel? Almost everyone, even great spiritual beings, I'm always surprised, tend to bow before the God of feeling. If you want to know the truth, you must bow before the God of truth, not before the God of feeling. And so I can't believe how many emails I've received this week for questions. So I thought I'd jump right into that. And the first question, I think we'll roll right into this teaching. Let's see, I can't remember who this one is from. I believe it's from Tracy, but let's see. Craig, I have a problem with the phrase, we are all divine, when there are so many individuals in this world who behave and act so opposite of good, so opposite of what I perceive as divine. I find it hard to put everyone in the same category of divinity. It takes away the value of goodness that divinity holds. I know that this is a question that has to do with my definition of what divine is. Not necessarily, Tracy. It's true what you're saying. Like if we just whitewash everything and say everything is divine, I mean, that could be a horrific teaching. Earlier this evening, I spoke about a concentration camp. And I certainly wouldn't want to call that divine. And call Jesus divine and just put those two things together. That would not be fair. It wouldn't be right. So I want to read some more about Father Kolbe. The person who sentenced him to death was Rudolf Höss. I might not be saying his name right. He was the commander who ordered the 10 to die in the concentration camp. He'd also introduced the pesticide. This is going to be a little bit grim, but I'm going to just read it. Zyklon B into the gas chamber, and was thus responsible for upwards of 2.5 million other deaths. Now, this fella, the SS officer who put Father Kolbe to death, later on in his life, he was arrested and tried. And in the solitude of my prison cell, this is him speaking, I have come to the bitter recognition that I have sinned gravely against humanity. May the Lord God forgive one day what I have done. Höss converted on his deathbed, confessed to a priest, and returned to the Catholic faith of his youth before being hanged. Before being hanged. It was said that Saint Kolbe laid down his life, not just for Francis, I'm going to butcher this, Gudzinski. That was the one who begged for his life, who had the children and the wife in the concentration camp, and he wanted to live. And Saint Kolbe took his place. So Saint Kolbe laid down his life, not only for this father, but for the 9 other who are condemned, and for Höss as well. As Saint Kolbe has written to his mother back in his youth, pray that I will love without any limits. So Saint Kolbe is a man who is divine, who had realized his divinity and who lived it. Now, the SS commander was someone who did not know his divinity. He was disconnected from his divinity. Completely disconnected from it. Until one day he found himself in a prison cell and was about to be hanged. And when this Nazi commander had some time alone in silence, time to reflect upon the horrors, the horrible crimes that he committed. He realized that he too had a heart that was divine, and a heart that begged for forgiveness, that begged for forgiveness. And so, this teaching that I have, that, we are all divine. We're all divine in our hearts. But if our hearts are covered in darkness, in hatred, in prejudice, in fear, in greed, and envy, and jealousy, there's divinity that's still within us. Like, in our essence, we're divine. But a heart that's covered in hatred, can kill. Like this story writes, the article writes, 2.5 million people. And so, of course, that's a horrific act. Horrific things can occur when our heart is veiled. And immense beauty can manifest when our heart is unveiled. When our heart is unveiled. Now, this SS guard or SS commander, he got carried away with the political climate of Germany in World War II, and hatred and prejudice. He got carried away. He was lost in that hell. Absolutely lost in that hell. And we could judge him. It's easy to judge him. But from a place of compassion, I could admit that there's been days when I've been lost in hell, when I've been disconnected from my own divinity. And I'm sure if you reflect, you can find the same thing. We can all find this. That we've had days where we've been under enormous stress. Sometimes it's just the last 8 years we watched too much news. We got carried away with whatever crazy political thing was going on. We just got lost in that realm. People in the last, 3, 4, 5 years, I've heard the craziest things from human beings. And just the stuff that the media has given us, social media, conspiracy, theories, and then heck, sometimes we find out that the conspiracy theories are actually true. Actually true, and the media has been lying to us. The thing that we thought was the truth. It's been nutty. It's been nutty. And human beings tend to get carried away, and when we get carried away by untruths, the further we go in the realm of untruth, falsehood, we cover our heart, we cover our divinity. When we're born, we're all divine. We're all these bright divine lights. But then we have a conditioning from our family, from our education, from our culture, from the politics that we grow up in, and the times of nationalism or whatever it is. And all of this has the ability to cover our divinity. But at the root, fundamentally, Tracy, all of us are divine. But our behavior, certainly not. Certainly not. It's quite unfortunate. Well, many of us, our behavior turns out. Okay. A really long question from an old friend, my old friend Catherine up in BC. I don't think I can read this whole thing, but I want to just read some of it just so we get a sense of it. She writes, "Hi, Craig. It's clear that a large percentage of humanity has become addicted to their phones. I recommend the documentary, The Social Dilemma, to anyone wishing to learn more about it because it explains well the mechanics of exactly how we become addicted. The brain hacking, the dopamine surges, etc. That people are willing to risk their own lives and that of others through texting and driving, something I see happening on a daily basis in my small town. It blows my mind." Yeah, I'm blown away. I just drove across country this last weekend for the second time this month. And I see truckers, people driving big rigs, and they're texting and driving, and it's horrific, incredibly dangerous. I saw many accidents too, possibly from this. It appears on the relative that most people have become like human zombies. Distracted is a word that comes to mind. I'm especially concerned about the youth and the children whose brains are still developing. From an absolute perspective, it appears that this is somehow necessary for our evolution as a species. But then she writes, "Or is it?" I was filled with awe last month, alone on the beach at night. An astonishing string of lights suddenly appeared on the horizon. There were about 30 in total. I was sure that the sky people, extraterrestrials, were showing themselves. After about 20 minutes, the lights disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. Saw a man a ways down on the beach, approached him to ask if he'd also seen it. He set me straight and explained about the Skylink satellites, Elon's initiative to extend internet into the most poor and remote areas of the human population. What say you? I really value your opinion. Thanks, Craig. Yeah. So our culture, our species, is beginning to merge with technology. It seems like this is just the next evolutionary step, and it's happening. When I see evolution, I believe in evolution. And by that, I mean, not that I believe it's happening, I know it's happening. But I believe that we are growing in a way that evolution is a growth in a greater life. A greater life. Now, I don't think people, I don't know where my phone is, but people do, like, I don't think it's the right thing for us just to walk around staring at a screen. It's not good for our brains. It's not good for our consciousness. But I cannot argue that it is happening. And there's some type of morphing that will happen between the human self and AI and the next wave of life here on planet Earth. I mean, it's happening. And I see evolution as, I don't want to say fundamentally good, but fundamentally intelligent. Now, I laugh because I heard this on a podcast that like when the train first came out, there were certain people who were afraid to get onto the train. They thought if the human being went, at a speed of 35 miles an hour, that their brain or their body might explode. And that's kind of hilarious, um, to think that. And so there were people, who are afraid of this. But there's something going on with technology. Like we're using it right now to meet, and it's so incredible that I can speak with you and you can be anywhere in the world. We can meet in this way. And so it's certainly leading to a greater level of oneness through this sense of connectivity and oneness with information, and the ability to connect at lightning speed and erase, time and space. There's something that's happening. Now, where exactly it takes us, of course, I don't know, but the question is, just like with anything, are we a conscious participant? Are we completely unconscious? Are we a conscious participant? Or are we completely unconscious? At some point in history, the rifle was invented. And, if you're a hunter and if you eat meat, it's a far superior device. It's a far superior tool than a bow and arrow. Bow and arrow, you shoot an animal with a bow and arrow, it's actually a long and gruesome death. I have friends who bow hunt, and if they shoot an elk, they shoot it in the chest with an arrow, and the elk might get up and walk for 2 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles with an arrow through its lung while it's bleeding to death. Now, if you shoot it with a 308, that can end its life in less than a second. They can provide meat for a family or for your village. But last night, I just read this horrific thing this evening. Last night, a man walked into a nightclub and lay waste, to too many human beings with this rifle. It's crazy what we can do with technology. We can end life on planet Earth, or we can have tremendous energy and heat our houses. So it's all a matter of what our consciousness is. What our consciousness is going forward with technology. Do we use technology for that which is good and healing and wholesome? Do we use technology for acts of war and acts of violence? My God, when the machine gun was invented, it's just a horrific thing. You could mow down thousands of men in a day with one gun. So the plight of our species, the trajectory of our species, will be determined on how we relate to technology, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to each other. With all the information on the internet, that Elon's doing this thing with the satellites and providing internet, I think it's a wonderful thing. But again, is the internet used for good? My little brother, he lives on a farm in Northern California, and last time I visited him, I couldn't teach Satsang because the internet doesn't work there. But next time I go back, my little brother has Elon's internet and he has blazing fast speed, and I'll be able to teach from Trinity County, California. And I'll be really happy to. I'll be really happy to. I'm happy that I can make a FaceTime call with my brother now. See his beautiful face. Whereas in the past, I could not. It's just a question of what type of humans are we going to be? Are we going to be humans that use AI to kill each other? And in a sense, like I think that's happening in Ukraine right now with drones and AI, and just finding more sophisticated ways of killing each other. Or we can use it, find sophisticated ways to cure COVID or long COVID or Alzheimer's or end poverty or fix issues with the food shortage and supply chain. So it's up to us. It's up to us. And the thing that we have to watch out for is that we don't just become, like I've had friends before. I had a friend named Ben once, and one day, this was in like the early 2000s, but he kind of looked at the internet and just all the craziness of the world, and he was just, I was living, with a bunch of hippies at the time, and we were all sitting around the table, breaking bread together. And he just got up and said, "I'm going to go walk across the world with no money, no car, no phone, no internet." And he did. He did. He just went for a walk and disappeared. And I think I saw him like 5 years later or something. And he just became just like a homeless, traveling hippie kind of fella. And that's, like that's one way of just revolting. And Gandhi tried this, by the way. Gandhi, he tried to make India go backwards, back to, gosh, it was a word for it. The cotton spinners is what he tried to get his culture to go backwards and just to spin cotton again, and not embrace the Industrial Revolution. And when you look at India and all the pollution and the smog and just that may have been the right thing, but it's mostly impossible to get evolution to go backwards. Sometimes people can press the pause button. Like when I was young, I lived in an Amish community in Ohio. And my babysitter didn't have a car. And they just rode around on horse and buggy. And it was just, you can try that route, but it doesn't look like that way works. And so the question is how do we go forward with technology and use it for good? Use it for the energies of healing and awakening. And so the question is always, are we connected to the truth? Are we connected to light? Are we connected to love? Or are we using our phone simply to distract ourselves from the feeling of unease? Are we using our phone to distract ourselves from the pain, the angst, sadness, fear that we have within ourselves? How are we using our technology? It's a great question for all of us to ask on a daily basis. Okay. It's a great investigation, Catherine. And, as parents, of course, I think it's important to really limit technology with our children. Like, my little girl's 8, and of course, I'm not going to let her have a phone anytime soon. Or sometimes she grabs my phone and starts playing with it, and I just holler at her and put it down and say, hey, we're going to play in the here and now. And because of that, like tonight, she's like, hey, Daddy, I want to go outside and look at the stars. And I said, okay, good. So she went out there and she saw her first shooting star. She saw, she said she saw a couple of planets out there. I think Mars is big and bright out there right now. And maybe Saturn, but she saw a bunch of satellites floating through the space, be in the awe of life. And so I think it's important put limits on your own self, because these phones, they really suck us in. Yeah, let's see here. Someone writes, in 2014, I had a vision that showed me that the internet is just a manifestation of all the interconnected information that's available right now, including the speeding up into the now. Yeah, so true. So true. Yeah, Terry writes, maybe not evolution, but de-evolution. Yeah. And again, it all depends on how we use it, on how you respond to it, how you relate to it. It's easy to judge it and say it's bad and wrong, but I mean, here we are, we're using it right now. And it appears we're using it for something quite good. We're meeting together in the heart. We're meeting together in love. Okay. Here's a question. I have a number of questions about Kundalini and Kriyas. This is from David. Hi, Craig. Does Kundalini awakening survive across multiple lifetimes? You teach that Kundalini is an evolutionary force embodying spirituality into the physicality of a new human body. But that Kundalini physical evolution doesn't often get passed on by biology. Evolution, as we know it thus far, requires physical procreation. Yeah, no, David, I'm gonna disagree here. So, or I'm gonna clarify what I'm teaching here. Kundalini awakening does survive across multiple lifetimes. It absolutely does. Here's one of the ways I know this is that there are many people in the group in the Sangha who came into this lifetime who were not spiritual at all, like in any, practical sense of that word or definition. They weren't spiritual beings. They're just normal, everyday, let's just call it ordinary Joes. And at some point, boom, their Kundalini woke up within them. And what that points to, when Kundalini wakes up in an individual who has not done any spiritual practice ever, it points to the fact that the Kundalini is awake in their soul, in their essence, and that they had awoken it in a previous incarnation. And so therefore, when they incarnate in this incarnation, at some point during this incarnation, the Kundalini will wake up, and it will wake up very quickly, even though they haven't done the necessary preparation, they haven't done the meditation, they haven't done the yoga, they don't have the training. And often it's very confusing for this human body that hasn't done any of the practices or any of the sadhana, doesn't really know what's going on. But because the soul had awoken it in a previous incarnation, that Kundalini arises with little or no effort spontaneously. And and then they're forced in a sense, to manifest their spiritual self, to bring it online, to get to know it. And so, yeah, there is something that lives from lifetime to lifetime, my friend. And I've seen this just countless times, more times than I could ever remember. The person's always shocked, saying, like, why did this happen to me? Well, it's because they are a deeply spiritual person. They just did not know that in this lifetime. So their relative human nature did not know it in this lifetime. And the Kundalini was waking up, reminding them of who and what they are beyond lifetimes. Beyond lifetimes. And so I hope that's helpful. Okay. I have a number of questions about Kundalini Kriyas. And so I thought I might just read all of these and blend them all together. I'm not sure how to do this. Craig, can you speak on this perceived paradox? When I meditate, my body begins to twitch, sway, make humming sounds, palms reaching up, sometimes spine rolling movements. These are Kundalini Kriyas. Feels good, and I kind of encourage it. How do I know if this is Kundalini energy? Because this is this is what Kundalini energy does. So I'll just tell you that. It's energy awakening. It's intense. It causes these twitches, these kriyas, the spine rolls. I mean, this is all typical Kundalini Kriya energy. Should I relate to the bodily reactions I experience? Yeah. So basically, yes, just surrender to them, open to them, let them flow. And then here's another question. Craig, I want to know if I'm resisting something and not letting it go. If I'm holding on to something, how can I know that? When I meditate, I jerk. Those are the kriyas, like these little jerks that we do a lot. So I cannot focus to go inwards and get answers to my questions. Okay, so if you're having Kundalini Kriyas, the basic teaching here is open to the energy and let it flow. The more you open to it and let it flow, the more quickly it will integrate, the more quickly it will pass, the more quickly it will release. And so if you're having big Kundalini Kriyas and the body's moving in this way, I wouldn't be concerned about, questions you have in your mind. The question you should have is, how can I open and allow this energy to flow? And this comes down to having a basic trust in this energy that's awakening within you. This basic trust in this energy that's awakening within you. Now, I will tell you this, that at the heart of life, when life gives birth into matter, into form. If any of you have ever been like on the edge of a pond or a stream, a body of water where there's frogs, there's tadpoles, there's fish eggs, and you ever see like a little tadpole, just coming kind of out of its little egg, out of its embryo form, you'll see it starts to, kind of squiggle and move like this. And it's making all these like thrashing movements with its body, with its spine. And this is how life wakes up in matter. And Kundalini is the same way. It's the energy of life, the energy of divinity exploding open. And it makes these kind of like snake-like, very fluid movements in the spine. Often they could be these jerking, kind of explosive movements. This is the energy of Kundalini. And of course, if I was the mama or papa frog, and the little tadpole comes like, is it okay that I'm making this movement? It's like, yes, please make this movement. Please let the energy flow. Let your body grow and dance and wiggle and, wiggle your way out of the shell. And that's what we're doing. We're breaking up old karmic tendencies. We're releasing places that were held tight. And if you go with the flow, this can be deeply healing. And so when we have a question like, am I resisting it? Am I letting go? Listen, if energy's flowing, you're letting go and you're doing it right. Okay, if you're in your head, thinking about how to control it or how to do it right, that's a form of resistance. What I'm going to invite you to be is just to be animalistic and just let the body do what it wants to do. Sometimes the body will grunt and will heave and make noises. And, sometimes the tongue will stick out and will make these faces and like all these wild Kundalini movements. Just let it flow. And if the spine arches and the hands come up and the head goes side to side, just let it flow and trust in the movements. It will all just burn itself out. And if you just trust and you go with the flow, you'll begin to experience more bliss and freedom and spaciousness. But if you're up in your head trying to control the process, thinking that this is somehow bad or wrong, or I need to be Zen-like and keep my spine exactly straight and control the process, this is a very egotistical approach. I encourage you just to let the body dance, let the body flow, let the body move. And the more you trust it, the more quickly this will go and it'll move through you. When this happened to me, I was receiving I went on 2 retreats, one with my teacher, David, and then I went on a retreat with Adya, and then I came home, I felt all this energy in my body. I went and a good friend of mine, he gave me, he was doing some type of Thai massage where he was really stretching my body, this new bizarre type of massage I'd never had before. I wouldn't even call it a massage. It's just like he was holding my arms and making me do all these back bends. And my body started having all these seizures and these Kriya movements. And he turned pale and really freaked out, thinking something was really wrong. And, I just smiled because I felt so blissful and euphoric. And even though I could, it's like I couldn't even really walk and my hands were stuck in these weird positions. And it was just really bizarre. But I just trusted. I had a basic fundamental trust in the process. And that really helped me. It really helped me. It was tremendously helpful. And this went on for a good 3 years where I had really intense kriyas. And then that continued for another couple of years where it wasn't so intense, but eventually it all worked itself out. And then now the body just feels like a bliss body. It feels full of bliss and light and space, heat and aliveness and this flow of grace. And so it's quite beautiful. Quite beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to respond to one more question on this. It's a long one again, but let's see. Over the past 3 years, Craig, my Kundalini awakening, my body has been spontaneously performing elaborate kriyas. Again, that's good. Dramatic motions of mudras and body stretches that range from soft and flowing to dramatic and abrupt and usually painful. These kriya sessions last at least an hour daily, sometimes several times a day. They are debilitating because they bring feelings of I have trouble with this word, lethargy and nausea, and sometimes loss of breath or coughing. Okay, so let's just talk about that. So afterwards, sometimes we get into states, like after you've had big energetic releases, and I don't care if it's Kundalini or you're letting go of old karma. Sometimes you're just left with a feeling of just emptiness or emptiness, numbness, spaciousness, or just like lack of energy. That's your body telling you, like, look, you just need some downtime to lay here on the couch and let what happened integrate. Just let it integrate. That's a good thing. Sometimes there's nausea. Nausea is light. It's the energy of light, and it's cooking old layers of karma. Again, that's a good thing. Now, nausea and being really tired after these types of sessions can be debilitating, but ultimately it's good. Because these are the energies of awakening. These are the energies of integration. And so they're helping you unveil your heart, unveil the 7 chakra centers. Sometimes there can be loss of breath. That's the releasing of anxiety and or coughing. Coughing is often the clearing of the throat chakra. One day this week, I awoke with a severe migraine and the feeling of very dense and heavy energy upon me, which caused Kriya sessions. This has happened many times before, but this time was the worst of my experience. In these cases, it takes almost a day for the Kundalini to work on clearing the dense energy. I believe these experiences are evidence of a spiritual attack from individuals who wish me harm. But I don't know if this is the truth. Okay, so I'm going to step in here and right away say, this is not the truth. This is not the truth. When we feel darkness within us or heaviness, it is almost always our darkness. Now, don't take that personally, like I'm calling you bad or wrong. But we have darkness within us. Our culture has darkness within it. And again, that doesn't mean that you are bad or wrong. We all, because we're human, we have dense layers of animal nature. Now, this darkness here, my dear, like you think someone's attacking you, this is actually the opposite. Like when we live under this fear that someone is attacking us, like spiritually attacking us, psychically attacking us, we have the darkness of fear and magical thinking, which is veiling us. Magical thinking needs to be cleared out of our consciousness. We think that someone with a voodoo doll can stick needles in it and cause us harm. We become the victim of fear. And so, my dear, the opposite's happening here. Kundalini is clearing fear from your body. And when it does that, often there's many layers of darkness, of denseness, of heaviness, of nausea. Again, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. So it's not someone on the outside. It's always easy to blame someone on the outside that someone's doing something to us. But more often than not, it's our pain and confusion, or the pain and confusion of our ancestors, the pain and confusion that's in our epigenetics, like in our DNA, again, our ancestors, or the culture. But I doubt there's an individual somewhere who's, invested in harming you and working with black magic to come and get you. Come and get you. I don't get the sense at all that that's what this is. What I imagine this is, my dear, is it's that very fear that someone else can have power over you. It's that fear is being cooked out of you. That magical type of thinking is being cooked out of you because you've had this. And I know you, my dear, you've had this thought too long. You've had this fear too long. And this thing needs to end. So the Kriyas are here to heal. And often Kriyas are bursts of Kundalini light, and these bursts of Kundalini light often shine into places of deep wounds, deep darkness, deep fears. And when that occurs, it can bring up things that are heavy. And this is something that no one really told us on the spiritual path, that whenever we see a brochure for a meditation retreat, we see these people and they're going, Om, and they look like they're just in heavenly bliss. Keep in mind, the way I got to heavenly bliss was through walking through hell. I didn't get to heavenly bliss through chasing heavenly bliss. I got to heavenly bliss through opening to hell and meeting it with love, with compassion, with clarity. And again, the clarity was me seeing that I was blaming others for things that were happening in my life. And my clarity was the willingness to stop blaming others, to take responsibility for what was within me. This is what Kundalini wants. This is what any spiritual light wants for any of us. Is to stop blaming the outside and stop living from the perspective of the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response tells us if it feels good, therefore it is good. If it feels bad, it is bad. But often on the spiritual path, and this is what's not talked about, is that if something feels bad, often that's a sign on the spiritual path that you are cutting through the darkness, you're cutting through hell, you're cutting through delusion, you're cutting through pain and dark, heavy, dense, aspects of your own human animal nature. That's a good thing. And so when there's nausea in me, I know, oh boy, this is a really good thing. I'm burning through resistance. If I wake up and I feel darkness or heaviness within me, I look at it with curiosity. And I meet it with kindness and love. I don't have the thought someone is psychically attacking me. I ask, what is this energy about? And I see that there's some fundamental confusion in this human form. And so I meet the confusion with love, with kindness. I don't buy into fear that someone else has power over me. The only one who has power over me is God above. And the power that God has over me is such a good power, a holy power, a loving power, a kind power. God is not here to punish me, and humans aren't here to punish me. Now, sometimes humans get carried away and say mean things about me, but I'm not going to get involved with that. I'm not going to step down to their level. So the Kundalini is getting you to try to rise in consciousness into something quite greater. Something quite greater. Okay. So if anyone here has a question, I invite it forward. I invite the question to be short, clear, and direct. If you have something. Yeah. And forgive me, I might mispronounce your name, but it's Madhuri asks, is that related to evil eye or witchcraft? Yeah. So I'm going to invite everyone, maybe I'll say this differently, no one to believe in evil eye or witchcraft. Like these things don't have power over us unless you give your power away and believe in them. And so someone places, I'm going to give everyone the evil eye right now, and I'm going to send you love. It's what I'm going to do through my evil eye. So I encourage no one to believe in this type of thing. I encourage you to believe in the force of love, the force of kindness, the force of compassion, force of goodness. If someone gives you the evil eye, smile back at them. Say, wow, look at those big eyes you have. They're looking kind of funny right now. They're looking kind of, are you trying to give me a message of some sort, And, to call the person out and, to meet them with love, to meet them with kindness, to meet them with kindness. Respond to the evil eye with kindness. here in the United States, I don't think we call it the evil eye. We call it something different. It's a terrible name. We call it the stink eye. And I don't know what that means, but I don't know if it means you stink or they stink or what it means. But it's silly when someone gives us, I think it's a dirty look. And so this is in the realm of magical thinking, and we need to step beyond this and trust that you are a being of light, that no one has power over you. And I really invite everyone to hear this. No one has power over us unless we give them power over us. I mean this in an absolute context. Okay. Justina writes, in Hinduism, let's see. Basically, the states of evolution are subtle things that are carried through each lifetime. Yeah, and this is the truth, that we grow, and the things we learn we carry from lifetime to lifetime. And what you'll find is that there are some things that where you've been traumatized, and sometimes with great trauma, you carry that to your next lifetime. You carry that to a next lifetime. And I can say that I was traumatized in previous incarnations. I died. I was in a couple wars, and I had so many lifetimes as a monk, but I had a couple of lifetimes as a soldier, and I died in the trenches. And I brought that trauma into this lifetime. I just had all these memories of me dying in trenches and running out of bullets, and being unable to defend myself, and dying a terrible death as a young man. And in a funny way, it's just so funny to me that I have this strange fascination with weapons, and like having guns and ammunition, and it's just, I have these thoughts that float through my consciousness, not so much anymore, but they did a lot when I was a kid. I was like, oh, why am I always just thinking about this? And I attribute it to the fact that I grew up in a military family, but when I looked into it in a deeper way, I saw, oh no, like I literally died in combat because I'd run out of bullets, and when I was unable to defend myself. And so there was just something that was imprinted into the psyche of my soul, and it came into this lifetime as a trauma. And so something I had to work with healing, because in this lifetime I'm not at war. I'm in an unusually safe incarnation. So anyways, okay, well, let's see. Not seeing anything. Oh, here's one. Hi, Craig. Can you speak on the difference between hard work based on personal will versus hard work that is divinely inspired? Yeah, well, of course, divinely inspired hard work is much more efficient. Like when you are in your human nature feels inherently divided. And because of this, it relies on its own individuality. It's the egoic sense of being. And when I first stepped on the path, like I had an incredibly strong personal will. And I would meditate for hours and hours without moving. I spent, all my days, my weeks, my nights, my weekends serving my teacher. And the majority of it was from personal will. And because of that, I was often exhausted, overly tired. At the heart of it was this divine inspiration where I wanted to know the truth and I wanted to be free. And more as I gave myself over to this divine inspiration, I began to find, like Saint Colby, this otherworldly strength. I'm not going to compare my strength to his strength, but I say I found this otherworldly strength. And when you find this otherworldly strength, then we're not so concerned about how we feel. Something feels good or something feels bad. Like if I chased after things that felt good, what feels good to me? Chocolate cake. So I'd be eating lots and lots of chocolate cake, and I'd probably weigh 300 pounds. But that chocolate cake isn't divinely inspired to me. God realization is divinely inspired. So that's what I've given my life to. That's what I've given my life to. Now I can say this with confidence now again. I live out west. I lived in the South for a minute, but I live out west now. Out west, we have these things called hot springs. And if you ever are a hippie and you tour around the hot springs of the West, you'll see that there's these certain hippies who they get in the hot springs and they make a life out of it. And if you look at like, what is a hot spring? It's a warm bath. And there's these guys, if you've hung out at hot springs like I have, you see there these guys. I'm going to be a little graphic here, who like to be naked and who are tan from head to toe. And they look like lizards, they're just like this brown, red color where they've just spent so much time just sitting in this warm water. And what lizards are like, lizards just like to be warm. They're sit on a rock that's warm and just bask in the sun. And they just follow their animal nature of wanting to be comfortable. Wanting to be comfortable. So that's what it means to be inspired in a human desire level type of way, where we just want to be comfy all the time. But if we're divinely inspired, like Christ was, comfort is irrelevant. And I'm not saying then that you're mean to the body or hard on the body. And that you beat up the body, but you focus on truth. And you walk in the direction of truth. Now, I have friends, I have to admit, who got stuck in the hot springs for a decade or two. And these are super hippies, they got stuck. It is wanting to feel good. Now, most human beings want to feel good, and so they chase it in money or fame or Instagram likes or having the perfect job or having, like some people I know, they just try to have as much time off as they possibly can. They don't ever want to work. I have friends who are just ski bums. They just want to ski. Chase the endless summer, endless winter. But when we're divinely inspired, we go beyond the desire of our ego. When we move through personal will, we often have a goal that is based upon the attainment of something for our own sake. And like a lot of people, they want to find the end of suffering just because they don't like pain. But that's not what the Buddha was speaking about. The Buddha wanted to find that which was beyond suffering. A different type of mind, a different type of being. That's different than not wanting to suffer. Not wanting to suffer is simply the fight or flight response. It's the ego. This is a great question of what's here that isn't afraid of suffering. What's here that's willing to find God, to discover the truth in the darkness. And so a moment ago, we had 3 or 4 questions about Kriyas. Like, what's here that's willing to find the truth of Kriyas? And not to just jump to the conclusion, if that feels bad, that means they are bad. No. If it feels bad, if you begin to investigate, well, what's going on here? Oh, they're clearing karma. They're releasing pain. They're freeing areas of tightness or tension within me. That is a radically good thing. And so when it's divinely inspired, Kyle, we're moved by a force that is beyond the ego. And that will take us into areas of life that we normally would not go. And if I was living by my ego right now, I might be sitting on the couch with a couple beers in me watching hockey. Like it's hockey season right now. Maybe that's what I'd be doing. Maybe I'd be down the street at a warm bar, eating pizza and having a beer and watching hockey. Just attending to the ego. But as you see, that's not my truth. So when you follow the movement of divinity, Kyle, it will take you into realms beyond your humanity. When you follow your personal will, it's almost always marked by tension and strife and struggle. Like there's some kind of fight with personal will. When it's divinely inspired, often there's a great surrender. And you step into this flow, this great flow of divinity. This great flow of divinity, where you see that all is God, all is truth, all is love. And so good to be with you all this evening. I think I'm going to call it a night. So the schedule should be set. I'm here. There shouldn't be any interruptions. Not sure what day Christmas is, but if Christmas is, let me take a look here. Christmas is on a Sunday, so I'm not certain I'll be teaching Christmas night. We'll see. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'll make that decision later on down the line. Otherwise, I'm going to be here and look forward to being with you all. Oh, and an announcement. I did open up a couple more days and some really soon. So if anyone wants to meet, look on my calendar because there's some openings. I think there might even be some openings tomorrow or this week. And so just take a peek if you're interested in meeting. I know a lot of you said you really wanted to get in. And so look at my schedule and see if there's something that's still there. All right. So much love to each of you. May God bless you all with the highest light, love, truth, and healing grace. Good night, everyone. See you soon. Much love.